Hello and welcome to the T-Force LCS Rundown, episode 66, week 2 of the LCS. My name is Mark Norm, and this week I am joined by a few good guys. Oh, we got Diane Safer. Oh, we got the material box.
I would wave at the camera, but problems.
Yeah. And we've got Mr. Chris Kringle.
Hello.
We'll
Yeah,
have
I finally
Optimus.
have a name now.
We'll have Optimus Tom soon enough. He's going to go and take care of a few things before we go too deep into the EU LCS, because I feel like if we had cut that part out of the show from him, he would die. He's going to need that.
That's his lifeblood.
I also had
so
to watch all of EU this week so that I could help
Yeah.
Tom out, and that
you're now Tom. Congratulations. That comes with a Riot contract and a few other things that you'll get in the mail.
Deal.
So
Deal. I look
welcome.
forward to that, actually, believe it or not.
So a few housekeeping things before we get going with this week. You may not know this, but we're a podcast network here at the T-Force LCS Rundown, and we have a ton of other shows going live every week. Most new and most notable of which is our new D&D style show, which is airing primarily on YouTube. That's going to be your best place to consume it, on the T-Force channel, but you can also find them on our Twitch channel, our backup, T-Force Podcast 2, which is a ton of fun. So I know I'm in Tuesday's game, which is playing tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern, but it's brand new. Check us out. It's a ton of fun, and it's free like all of our lovely content. And if you don't necessarily think that free is the way that such great content should go, and that you want to support us fiscally, well, we have our Patreon, and that's of course at patreon.com/tforce network. We have had an overwhelming amount of support in our first couple of weeks, and we're looking to get up to that 2,000 mark where we can start sending members of the network, us, your favorites, of course, to esports events. So currently, as I'm looking at it right now, we're at $1,177 per month from you guys, the listeners. Lots of great different rewards you can get depending on how much you commit per month. Our very good friend Serial Baux has his own special show that he does with Days on the Proper, focusing specifically in on champions, so you can go in and check that out. It's all great stuff. There's a free edition of that. And who does that cover, Mitch?
That one is Aurelia, and we are going to be coming up with Morgana record next week, and then at the end of the month we're recording a new episode. So
Awesome.
Yeah, check them out.
Perfect. And those aren't, I mean, at least to me, those aren't super meta picks, so it's not like they're covering all the bigs. It's definitely, there's a little bit of fan commitment that goes into it and what you guys want to see. Definitely great stuff. Yeah, other than that, I mean, if you can't support us financially, support us with your voice. We'd love to hear from you. We have so many different ways you can do that. You have lcs@trinity4cepodcast.com. You have our voicemail, 978-378-0257. Twitter and the rest. But enough with that. Let's get right into the LCS news for this week. Those of you who may have remembered, back in week 1, something a little weird happened on week 1 of the EU LCS. The SKCW game was delayed until about halfway through the game, and there really wasn't any other explanation other than technical issues. But in kind of a bombshell, Riot sort of updated us on that and gave us a competitive ruling. That is their sort of transparency version of, here is some punishments that went down and here's what happened. I'm going to run through this super quick because I've been talking a lot, and we'll open this up to the floor. So basically what happened is the coach of the Copenhagen Wolves accused in some way Deficio, the caster for the EU, of feeding some information about SK strategy to CW. These claims were taken back by Dentist when an investigation was held. And even though Deficio was cleared of that, he was found out to have been in talks with the Copenhagen Wolves organization for a potential job, and also caught talking to other LCS players in ways that violated his contract with Riot. So basically, after all is said and done, the match between SK and CW stood because the information that Dentist provided wasn't accurate. Dentist has been suspended until week 4 because he lied and because he obstructed the investigation in other ways. And Deficio has been taken off the air until week 4, and he's never allowed to cast a Copenhagen Wolf game, I think, for the rest of the season. Don't quote me on that. But he is also LCS team ineligible, so that means he can't be counted as a player on a team, meaning a coach, basically. Coach. Right. It's the eligible player in an LCS roster until for the rest of the 2015 season and the entire 2016 season. So what are your thoughts on this? How do you guys feel that Riot handled this? What do you think about Deficio's actions? I talked a lot, so I'm going to drink a little bit, and then you just go.
So, as a caster, it's really important that you're able to communicate with teams, players, teams, coaches, pretty much any aspect of their team play, to probe deeper for information to help build a storyline, to help build a competitive narrative. And with that comes a certain degree of trust, meaning, like, I think when I was doing NACC, like, I knew what champs people were playing. I knew their picks, I knew their strategies, I knew everything. I didn't let that out in the cast, I didn't let that out in the color desk, but I knew what people were good at, I knew what they played. And, if I had shared that information, that would have not only violated that trust, but probably would have invalidated, as far as legitimate competition goes, the some of those games, And I think the same thing goes for EU casters. I'm sure that they're in touch with teams, coaches, players, etc. And so while I don't actually think that anything really went down here, my guess is that Deficio and Dentist are friends and that they keep those two things pretty well separate. It's still good on Riot to say, hey, this is like not acceptable to have that information, or even have talks of this. And from what I read, it seemed like Dentist was just trying to like give his players some confidence, like, hey, this is the secret strat, this is what we got, just to like give them some faith in something he was trying to do, something he was trying to have them execute. And from that, I think it's mostly just Dentist bad for saying that kind of stuff and for getting Deficio in trouble. But I also think that, when Riot went in and did the investigation and found out that there had been a job offer there, I think to build that honesty and to build that trust, I think Deficio should have said something to Riot about it.
And that
just
is
as a contracted employee.
Right. That is a part of his contract, actually, that if he does get approached by an LCS team or a player, that he does have to disclose that. So a bit of a misstep there. But overall, I think this is handled pretty well all around. Deficio put out a statement on his Facebook basically saying sorry, and that a lot of what he did was in the spirit of being friends, being an ex-player, and just interacting with people that he's close with. But he totally understands how it was misconstrued. I think Riot handled it pretty well, where not only did we not just hear about it in a passing remark, but they actually went the full distance and gave us the full breakdown of the investigation, and all of the pieces were in place off of something really nobody had any idea of, at least from what I saw.
Yeah, I actually like that Riot stepped in here. About like the part that I could see being a main issue is the Deficio kind of talking with teams. Obviously sharing strategies is a huge deal, but
right.
Like talking to let's say Deficio is friends with some of the players and somebody hears, oh, I heard you might be doing something with Copenhagen Wolves soon. I'd like to get in on that. And suddenly you've got lots of players that are getting, misinformation or just like getting influenced super hard to go make decisions way ahead of time. And that's a caster for Riot who's influencing them. So I like that they came forward with this. I love that they had those horrible like misconstrued headlines. The like shoutcaster suspended for tampering with everything. Oh my
god, it was the worst.
Everyone went crazy on Reddit when it happened because everyone loves to make a big deal out of something they don't know about.
Well, actually,
and it's understandable. Like it makes press, but at the same time, it's very ill informed, and everyone who was in the situation handled it super well.
Right, and I even think that our community, being the league community as a whole, did eventually kind of come to their senses more or less on the whole issue after everything came out. After Deficio made his statements, people kind of settled down and said, okay, no, this is something that happened, and it went the way it went, and we're all fine with that. But that's when all of the third-party press started picking it up and started putting spins on it, and the whole thing was just stupid.
And to be fair, like, I don't think there's any way you can prove either way that DeFicio did or did not give that information. I think you just have to trust him. But at the same time, I think it's good to punish regardless, and I think that
the punishment wasn't for the sharing of information. The punishment was for not disclosing his potential relationship, and also for speaking with LCS players in a manner that wasn't professional.
Definitely. But I think the thing is that the whole issue is about transparency, right? So it's really refreshing to see Riot be super transparent about it. Like, hey, this is what we're doing. This is everything that we know that happened. This is what we found. And I mean, it's I don't know if it's 100% transparency or not, but they did do a good job of making it feel like 100% transparency. And so I'd say the whole thing was pretty well handled. It sucks not to see DeFicio casting. I feel like that really negatively impacts the broadcast as a whole, because Crepo's doing pretty well for a new caster, but I mean, DeFicio I think is still much, much better, and I think it makes the EU broadcast a little bit rougher, but good on Crepo to cast as much as he did. Like, that's a pretty brutal schedule to go for, and I mean, you're doing the best with it that they can. So. Oh, absolutely.
So let's dance over to the next competitive ruling that came out this week, and then we'll actually get into some EU. Stixxay? Am I pronouncing that right? Stixxa.
I want to joke and make like Stiche, but I think it's Stixxay.
Stixxay, yeah.
So basically, there's been a player who's on the CLG roster. Now, note, this is CLG Black, the challenger team, not CLG proper from the LCS. The player was suspended for 2 weeks from all Riot official events. That is until June 17th, so it's 1 week from this cast. Basically for being caught with a number of toxic accounts. So this just wasn't his primary account that was that he uses as himself, that represents him, but also some Smurf accounts. He was found to be within the top 1.5% of toxic players and was suspended for that reason.
I like, in perspective, like 1.5% is like Diamond 1 of players. Like if you're going to put a percentage of people on league players, it's kind of amusing to think.
I mean, okay, so here's the thing. 1.5 isn't even Diamond 1. 1.5 is like Diamond 4. That's what's insane. Plat 3 is like 2.5%. Like 4, maybe 4%. Kind of funny though.
I laughed at this, where it's like, oh, cool. Well, I'm just gonna get on and rage now. Like, it's like, a rage account is all I read that as. It was just kind of like, all right, cool, man. Well, I'm just gonna specifically get on this account and just be a total dick. It's like, all right, well, I mean
it's one way to do it. It's better than raging on your main, I guess.
It's so weird. Like,
maybe let me just throw this out here.
Because his other account has like no toxicity on it, right? That's why the ban was so short.
So the numbers there are on his main account. He is reported in under 10% of his games, and within the last month, his lesser used accounts, he was reported in 55% of those games.
So pretty ridiculous.
By the way, and it's not 1.5%. Actually, yeah, no, that's right. It's 1.5% of all players that he is the most toxic.
That's on a resume. Just put that up there.
That's pretty impressive.
My Ratatat's in the top.
When you're a bouncer, of all like, how do we know you can talk that good shit? And he's like, hold on, sir. I am in the top 1.5% of toxic players.
Let me show you.
Let me show you how much profanity and racial slurs I have used in the last 2 days of my life. Let me show you.
I'm just glad to see that it's not just the top players who are getting this highly investigated, that Riot went as far as to look directly at all of his other accounts as well as soon as he got brought on. So it was a really thorough investigation. They applied the proper justice. It's good. Good all around, I think.
I think it's probably that they just do it anytime there's players that look like they're going to end up in Challenger League. My guess is that I know that they kind of generally do investigations of up-and-coming players, so my guess is this just came up in a general investigation.
Well, it's a shitty time for CLG Black because they're currently, Wednesday, they have their the NACS summer qualifiers, the finals for that. And he's actually a sub for Misfits as well, who's also in that same finals. So if something goes wrong with them...
Not the same game, thankfully.
Right.
They're on different sides of the bracket, so both teams can make it. Thankfully, it's not like he's playing for conflicting teams at all.
Exactly. So that's pretty much all there is for the news.
Although, wait. If they both lose, they go to the third place game. So
yeah.
Still a sub, though. There, you're fine. Yeah. I think,
that'd be pretty
profound. 6A fan. I'm not too worried about 6A being gone, honestly. I think Challenger scene will be just fine. I think there's a lot of talented AD carries.
6A who? So let's actually move on to Europe. Hopefully Optimus Tom will be joining us not too far away because there's so much to talk about this week. So per a listener voicemail that actually came in this week, which, by the way, is absolutely my favorite way of receiving listener mail, because Google Voice sends me an email with a translated version of your email, and it is just the absolute funniest thing to read and try to figure out before listening exactly what you're talking about. And I can tell you this week, the only word that was remotely League of Legends was LCS. And that was it. So that was a funny one. But to summarize the voicemail, basically talking about the Rise pick. And I feel like this is going to hop into plenty of our conversations because Rise hit Europe pretty hard this week. So let's start there. How you guys feeling about the Rise pickup? Picked, dominated in a lot, didn't do so well in others, and got banned in many more.
Broken.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any way around this. I think the casters did a good job of trying to communicate that this pick is insanely strong, but teams still did good things to make the games happen. But it's a must ban. We're not going to see it not banned or first picked if they're on blue side. I mean, I cannot imagine making it through bans, but if it does, it'll be a first rotation pick, and it's just insanely powerful. I think it slipped through the cracks because people were too excited about other things. People were too excited about Echo and other things coming out on that specific patch, and it just. Or, I don't even remember what came out on that specific patch. But, no one wanted to play Rise. And I know for a long time, teams have been testing it in scrims. And this is, one of the first weeks it was really available. And, surprise, surprise, it destroys a lot of games. Totally... I'm not going to say Xin Zhao release level broken, but it's pretty absurd.
Chain CC for days. Or just let them walk, 2 steps. And then maybe... and then root them again.
You think you're free? Nah. Let me sit here and just talk to you about my religion of electricity here and kill you.
That Huni highlight was just hilarious.
I watched it so many times just to figure out how many spells he casted. It's what?
When the player can probably just throw up his hands, remove himself from the keyboard and say, you know what, there is absolutely nothing I can do here. When he's still at 75% health, you're all right. Whatever. That's
not only that, he was
pretty
3-1, wasn't he? And Rise was 1-2. He was up a full level on him. It was just, there's no way he should have just been able to kill him immediately with no help, nothing. Just 100-0 him 4 or 5 rotations of spells, and just even Hootie's face was just all right, cool. I don't know how I did that, but I did.
Leave it to the strongest LCS region to find the strongest pick in the current meta.
And there's our objective voice.
There he is. There's a
welcome
not
back.
At all opinionated, not at all subjective co-host Tom.
What's interesting is Rise only made it through in 3 games. I don't have the information as to whether it was banned in the other 7. We're strictly talking EU on this. Fnatic pulled it off, obviously, with a 6-8 and 10 Huni. Unicorns of Love pulled it off with a Vizicachi at 5-1 and 7. Only team that was able to fail pretty hard at it was Gambit up against Fnatic with a 0-4 and 3 Cabochard.
Well, yeah, this Gambit right now, though.
I feel all right, let's talk about Cabochard real quick. Because remember when Cabochard was the god of top lane, and we were all man, Cabochard is so good. We're all so hyped for Cabochard. Let's be real, Cabochard's all right. Now, we have Otawamne, who's come in, who's clearly just a god of top lane. We've got
Currently
I think Soaz coming
bench.
back. I think Cabo's solid, but I also and there's also a strong possibility that Gambit really didn't see the Rise pick coming, and for whatever reason,
They actually didn't have water in their apartment that week, so they couldn't scrim again.
Oh,
Got
nice.
him.
Wow.
Are you joking? Is that a joke? Or are we serious right now?
Well, let's go back a little bit, because the thing that surprised me about Cabashard and A, not practicing Rise, and B, not doing well on the Rise, is the fact that this is the guy last split that played like 13 games on Morgana and Kennen and only did well on those 2 AP top laners. So suddenly there's this very massive, very strong AP top laner, but at the same exact time, he also played it against Huni, who was the person to figure out how broken it is and the person to play it first. And even in the interview they did afterwards, it was like, oh yeah, Huni played like 40 straight scrims and solo queue games in a day of how to figure out what Rise can do and how broken it is and how powerful it is. And then Cabashard's like, oh, we'll just leave that up and we'll take it away from him. And so, of course, Huni's going to know what you have to do to play against it. He's the guy that busted out in the first place. So you have Cabashard being like, oh, this seems pretty strong. I could do that. And Huni's like, oh, no, you can't do that.
It's so expensive, so fragile.
I have to like contain myself every time. For everyone out there in podcast land that doesn't know, Fnatic did an interview with Huni on like their own YouTube channel or whatever, and there's like a segment where they're driving him to LCS to do like player interviews, and he has like this little lapel microphone on, and they're asking him all these questions, and like he starts talking, and you can't really hear him, and so the guy from Fnatic goes to adjust his microphone, and Huni with his broken English is like, oh, don't touch it, you'll break, is so expensive. And that has become a running gag everywhere I go now. Every time someone touches someone, no, is so expensive. I love it.
I don't know how Fnatic plays. They just, without laughing throughout the entire game, listen to Huni. Especially, I really wish I could hear voice chat of what he was saying after that 1v1 with the Rise. Just because his face is like, all right, I just killed him. They just proceeded to dominate the game with Rise. Like stop it, Huni. Just have mercy, please.
And while Mott's actually stepped away for a second, for those of you who don't understand why Rise is so broken, it's because of his reworked passive, which after casting 5 spells will enter an overcharge state, where it gives him an 8% plus a couple of additional numbers worth of a mana shield. Think like Blitzcrank mana shield, where he gets this shield that absorbs extra damage. But during that time, because his passive no longer reduces cooldown with every spell he casts like he used to do. Instead, it only reduces cooldowns when in this overcharge state, and it reduces it by the amount of his cooldown on his Q, which has a 4-second cooldown. So Rise, nowadays, instead of maxing Q, because the cooldown doesn't go down, you don't need to spam it as much to get your cooldowns on everything else down lower, they're able to max other abilities. So they max his W, the Rune Prison, because every level you get in Rune Prison increases the snare by 0.25 seconds or something along those lines. So it starts off at 0.75 seconds and then caps out a bunch of levels later at 1.75 seconds or something along those lines. So in doing this, when you open up your overcharge state combo with a Rune Prison, you'll root them there for 1.75 seconds. The next spell that you cast will reduce your cooldowns by 4 seconds, so you throw out a Q. Then you throw out your E, which lowers the magic resistance and then also resets the rest of the cooldowns by 4 seconds. This will reset your Q, so as you are walking towards them, you keep throwing a Q, you E them, you throw another Q, and by the time they get out of being rooted, there is 0.25 seconds worth of time before you can just root them again and continue to do that. That state lasts for 6 seconds, so you should be able to get 3 roots off on one person while overcharged, which is what makes him so broken, and that's what the Huni highlight is.
4 roots total, because you start with a root.
Yes.
Yeah, so you can get max 4 roots total. And I mean, like, even if Rise did 0 damage,
that's broken.
8 seconds of root is pretty broken. Like, let's be real, that's pretty insane. If we ever gave us, even if support did 1 damage with his root, like that would be insanity, right? Like,
the AD carry's never moving again. You flash it and just root them forever, and you're like,
Rise,
well.
Rise does a shit ton of damage too. He scales with mana. He scales like pretty. I mean, he scales pretty poorly with AP, but he scales with AP and with mana. And so you just build you need 1 item, and you can duel people. He had like Catalyst Tear of the Goddess, and he's like, yeah, I'll just solo kill the Maokai. Nah.
I level down.
Tankiest character in the game.
a level. I'm down CS. I can totally 1v1 this guy. That's like bronze worthy, the thought processing, and he just pulls it out. I'm still laughing about that play. I just won't forget that play. I'm just like, dude, how? The minion wave was pushing against him too. Like, yeah, like, it's just he had every disadvantage and still won the trade.
Why don't we jump into some of the games too, because we've pretty much become the proper Rise episode right now.
I was going to say
it's like podcast Rise episode. Who knows?
A nice preview on that. Maybe you guys can get that one. But I was going to say, even though Rise was so strong in that game, he ended 6-8-10. That game was extremely, extremely close. That was Fnatic versus Roccat, the first match of the EULCS in week 2, and everybody was like, "Oh man, Rocket's just going to roll over. Fnatic's going to stomp them." And it was a 40-something minute game where it looked like the Roccat games from last split when they played against Elements, when they played against Fnatic, when they played against the Unicorns of Love, and they would drag these games out to a point in time where it was like, all right, this last fight is going to decide absolutely everything, and then people get caught and they lose the game.
Yeah, it was really, I mean, just to kind of go into it a little more, I honestly feel like if Rise wasn't so broken, I feel like Roccat would have won picks and bans here. Like, I really wasn't impressed with the Evelynn. The Nautilus Ezreal lane was kind of meh. Like, Ezreal in general, I know can be very strong, but just wasn't super impressed with it this game. And I think Urgot is still a power pick, even if NA never plays Urgot. We can talk about that later. It's a little ridiculous. But you're right. I think at the end of the day, like, Fnatic just kept their composure into the late game, and Roccat was just made a couple. Like, Roccat had the game, even with the Rise pick. Even after that turnaround, they had it, and I felt like they kind of just lost it. You know,
Roccat had a rough week.
Yeah,
like they had really both games. They had both games,
and I kind of feel like in both games, one of the things that really hindered, there are two things that really hindered them. One of them has kind of been a problem for a very long time in his positioning, which I guess we might talk about a little bit later, especially in the Unicorns of Love game. But the other
We've talked about that for days.
Yeah. Yeah. The other one was Nuke Duck, because
we've talked about it so many times.
We really have talked a lot about Woolite and his positioning. But the second one was Nuke Duck, because in all of these games, Nuke Duck took a long time to get going. And in the Fnatic versus Roccat matchup, he picked the quote-unquote faker matchup, which was Febiven was on Azir, so Nuke Duck counterpicked it with the Aurelia pick. And this is like 12 hours after Faker had done this in the LCK, and everybody was contemplating how powerful this counterpick was, or perceived counterpick in the mid lane, etc., etc. And Nuke Duck farmed well, but he didn't really do anything with it. You have like an Aurelia and a Maokai who are going to be able to jump on whatever target, like Woolite in theory would hyperkinetic position reverser, or if Jankos is going to knock them out of position, or if Morgana is going to bind them. Like, you have this powerful dive buddy combo that they just never really were able to utilize. I don't know if it was specifically Febiven and his Azir pick, which was constantly zoning people out with the Emperor's Divide. I don't know if it was just the amount of kite potential that the Fnatic lineup had with the Ezreal. Then you had a Nautilus and an Evelynn slowing everybody else down as they try to get in. But despite all of the advantages that were gained back and forth and thrown like this way and that way, Rockat's carries just didn't carry, and that seems to be a continuous theme with the team.
Well, I want to know from you guys with the mid Aurelia pick. Do you think the mid Aurelia pick is actually a good pick, or do you think it's a good pick for Faker? Because Faker could play almost any champion in the mid lane and do really well. So picking Aurelia and some of his LCK games have been really good because they needed the tanky carry almost, and he did carry really hard with it. So do you think that he's essentially just trying to copy someone and then couldn't pull it off, or do you think the actual mid Aurelia is a relatively good strat?
Little both. I would say that I think mid Aurelia has potential to be a strong pick. I think obviously Faker picking it up first. I mean, it's right now, I'd say from what we've seen, it's as much a good pick as it is a Faker pick. But I'd say, like, if you look at all the conventional AD assassins right now, like Talon's not very good. Zed got nerfed. It seems like a small nerf, but once again, it's pretty massive. And in the tank meta, both Talon and Zed are just much weaker. Aurelia is actually pretty solid in the tank meta. She has true damage, she has CC resistance.
And sustained damage versus burst damage.
Yeah. Well, and she has burst damage too. That's the beautiful thing about
it.
It's like, and her horribly designed kit, let's be honest. Like, why do you think this champion gets nerfed so frequently? It's because the kit is just weirdly designed. But she functions a lot like an assassin in the mid lane. And it's very easy for her to get on top of Azir, and Azir is very much about keeping an established like line of control. Like, you have to have the Sand Soldiers in front of you, but all she does is she like Blade Surge to a minion, or not Blade Surge, Blade Surge again. Like, if you hit a caster creep and then jump onto Azir immediately, like, he has to burn spells to reposition those soldiers, which has, like, a 0.25 second cast time. And if he's already hit you once or twice and you can stun him, you just get to jump in, stun, auto, walk out. And that's free trade, and you can do that whenever you want. So, like, what Fevivin ended up saying is at the end of the day, he just stayed back and just played really, really safe. And I feel like Nuke Duck just was not confident enough to punish that. And also, just in general, Roccat didn't have the jungle pressure necessary to get Aurelia ahead. Because if Aurelia gets ahead, it's such an easy matchup, like pretty much for any Aurelia lane in general. But didn't get Aurelia ahead. Aurelia was pretty much even the whole time. And I mean, in theory, you outscale, right? But Azir does much better in team fights by himself in a vacuum, as opposed to Aurelia, who really needs some assistance. And I think Morgana Black Shield is not enough to keep. This just isn't going to work.
Bullshit.
Yeah, I think Aurelia needs to be like ahead in mid lane. In top, you can go even or even a little bit behind and still be impactful in the mid game. But yeah, if you're talking about trying to counter bullshit late game damage, you have to be doing that before late game bullshit damage comes up.
I just think LeBlanc's better.
Exactly. I 100% agree. I think LeBlanc was the better pick here. If they didn't take Sivir as their AD carry, there was no reason to take Aurelia here.
So I want to take a look at Rockhat's week next week very briefly, because I think that'll be a good segue for us to start talking about Giants. It's having an uncharacteristically pretty good start.
What uncharacteristic? They started 4-0 last split.
Okay, well, I guess it's spot on then. So looking at Rockhat's week next week, they're going to have Giants in day 1, and then on day 2, they are going to have Origin. Given that they did pretty okay against Fnatic, I think all things considered, where are you placing them next week?
They're going maybe 1-1, but it's really difficult to predict because Giants are kind of the opposite Roccat right now, whereas Roccat seem to generally have an idea of what they're doing in the early game, how they're going to last into the late game, and like what they kind of need to do to win, but their carries just don't show up. Giants are kind of the opposite of that, where they might not have a solid game plan in the beginning of the game, but then they start fighting and their carries start carrying. So it's like a clash of styles. So it really, really depends. Like, I think honestly, it's a mid lane centered matchup until you hit the 40-minute mark, and then it depends where Woolite gets caught. I hate saying that though, but that's literally how Roccat games go.
No, it really is. That's exactly what it is. Woolite getting caught. It was exactly what happened in the UOL game. Like it's just kind of one of those. What? All right, well. There goes the AD carry, and he's gone.
He did it 3 times against Unicorns of Love. It took 3 times for Woolite to give Unicorns of Love the game.
I want to. Hey, did somebody check this? I'm curious. Is it possible that Roccat ended up with more fantasy points in that game than UOL did?
I think they did.
Yeah, they probably did.
Which is pretty. They ended up 6.5K gold ahead.
But I mean, also
lost
fantasy
the game.
Points. Like
I know, it's just interesting.
Could have 4 people fucking fall on a sword for him to get a pentakill, and he'd still get a pentakill and outscore everybody for the week.
True, but but in an individual game.
God, I can't wait for the fantasy update because it just could be me raging.
Shut the fuck up.
But let's talk about Giants. Because to me, I mean, sure, they always do great early on, or at least they did last split, but I still have so many questions about them. Now, they had 2 games this week that I don't think were overly hard in their matchups. They were up against Elements on day 1, and Elements really just... They had that one game where they went super hot, and you thought that maybe this was going to be the team to bring it back, but now I think they're 1-3 again, and it's just not looking good for them. And then their second game was against SK Gaming, who's pretty much in the same spot. So, what are your thoughts on Giants right now? I mean, Pepinero had the second highest, Audrey rather had the second highest fantasy points for 2015 so far, and it was Pepinero who had second highest for this week. They're putting up big numbers in certain places, but how long can we really expect this success to last? And I see Tom with his hand on his forehead.
You go first, Tom. You go first.
Deeply.
They can continue riding this wave of success until people start taking Morgana away from Godfred. Like, there, you can say what you will about Pepinero shoring up his shoddy lane phase and being able to 1v1 Froggen in lane while out farming him, Diana versus Victor. You can talk about how Werlib's really shored up some of the holes in his game and how Frederick's helping out those lanes a little bit better. You could talk about Adri suddenly becoming an AD carry instead of just like the background dude who's picking up kills and fights and farming for a long time. But all of this has come together when they've introduced Godfred, who I think it really kind of hit me of where his mind was at and how much he actually provides for this team when they did an Ashe feature this week. And, you know, it had Double Lift, you had Reckless talk about how OP Ashe is, and oh my god, Ashe is so cool. And then you get to Godfred, who we haven't really had heard from whatsoever, and he's detailing specific matchups and saying what she does well and how she's vulnerable and what counters her. And when you hear somebody like talking like that, you're like, holy crap, this dude has some pretty solid strategic insight. So looking at this, they add Godfred into this team. First off, I don't think the dude misses a Morgana binding. I don't think he misses a clutch black shield to get somebody out of danger zone. And suddenly Adri has the second most fantasy points and a ridiculously high KDA. Like, you can't put, like, if you put 2 and 2 together, Godfred is a big part as to why Giants are able to do this. He's roaming around the map, which is something that Giants were very vocal that Rydell couldn't do in that position. And he's also not only just moving around the map and helping out with Frederick on these other lanes, but he's providing a voice for the team. And he's making the team communicate in English and making them talk to each other. So I think if teams start taking things away from Godfred, like, I think that's what it's going to be. They don't have to worry about banning things away from Werlib specifically because he's expanded his champion pool. They need to really hinder that bot lane, and then I think things might start to fall apart for Giants.
This is pretty impressive because as far as I can tell from his Leaguepedia page, Godfred doesn't have any previous history, so he was picked up out of Challenger.
I think he played for a couple of teams, but I don't think he necessarily played for like an LCS contending kind of team. I think he played in some of the Challenger teams. He played on like this older Enigma esports team, I think tried to qualify in the springtime, and then he played with I believe he played with a team with Flaxus, who is unfortunately banned. Very toxic, but very strong top laner in the EU Challenger scene. So,
yeah, I think one other thing about Giants is that their 3 wins come 10 right now, and they're about to have in 3 straight weeks, not any consecutive games. They have Fnatic still. They've got H2K, and then. Wow, how am I blanking on Unicorns of Love? Oh. So they haven't played. They've the one good team they played in Orihen, like they got, I believe, pretty demolished. So, like, we haven't gotten a really good benchmark yet. Like, they're getting the wins early. That's going to help them out much later on when we're talking. I love Giants. I think that they're going to fall again, and I think these wins will be helpful when they fall, and hopefully don't get in a position to be tiebreaker to be relegated. But I love that they're looking stronger. I love that Godfred's doing great. And like the next week when they get, I think it's Fnatic, that's going to be a huge one to look. And if they can perform pretty well at least, and if they pull off a win, amazing. But if they can at least contend against Fnatic, I think that's going to be really huge.
Right. I mean, those are going to be 2 exciting games. Let's talk about Origin for just a little bit before we dust off onto brighter shores over to North America.
Let's just have the most fantasy points ever from a team. That's all you got to talk about. It's like, oh yeah, sure, let's just give whoever has me playing them just the win.
I have 2 and I lost. So let's not.
Well, I didn't play deals, so I'm really salty this week because I forgot to sub him in. I think my AD carry got something like 30 points this week. I think Sneaky got me less than that. Sneaky got me nothing, and then Neil's got 79 points.
Yeah, we'll do a full update on our current fantasy stats at the end of the episode. But at what point are you guys willing to accept Origin as more than just, I guess, honeymoon phase hype?
When they win something?
Are you saying they need to you, Optimus Tom, liaison of the European LCS, Origin is not a top team competitively not just in the standings, but competitively, until they win the summer split or a split of the LCS?
I think the first big test for Orihen is really going to come in week 4, because right now they've played against Giants, they played against Elements, I believe. Like they had the only real test that they had was against H2K, and it was like in week 1, and H2K just looked like they were asleep. So I really want to see week 4 they play against Fnatic. I think that's the big test. I did say that Orihen is going to be a top 4 team. I didn't expect them to be this good on paper and just this good the teams they played against so far, but I also didn't really expect Elements and SK to be this bad either.
Sure. The only thing...
I think... Hold on. Let me get in here before we jump on. I think Origin is the real deal. I think that Tom's right, though, that we can't really give them any credit until they win something, and I will say that the reason I respect Fnatic is not because they do well in EU, because they do well internationally. And I think if Origin can make it to Worlds and can take some games off some notorious, some strong teams, some teams from other regions.
That's shooting a little high for me. I mean,
I don't know. Like, looking at it right now, what are the teams you expect to make it to Worlds? Fnatic?
But for Origin to make it to Worlds, they would need to win the summer split.
No, they need to win the gauntlet.
Yeah, they
just have to make it to top 6.
Yeah, they have to be one of the top.
Sorry, top 5. It's kind of weird. Yeah.
Hold on. So here's my thing. Okay, so when we look at the teams that are sucking right now, right? Like Elements, SK, whoever. You can chalk that up to we have a new roster. We're taking a split to kind of suck. The first few weeks are going to be awkward. And we look at Origin, they're like, this roster's really only played a little bit together in Challenger, just about as much time as Elements has had to build their roster, right? And Origin is crushing these people.
I agree. That's totally on board with Sifa, because they are crushing their games, and also these players are also known to have a history, like you said with XPK and Soaz, that they've lost before. And so it doesn't, even if they do lose, it doesn't seem like they're really going to go on the hate train to each other and really go on this snowball of we're not good anymore. We need to, CLG replace people. They're just, I think that the way that they're playing, and if they continue their just ridiculous snowball, that even if they start losing a couple games, they're just going to come back stronger and crush even harder. And I think it'll be between Fnatic and Origin to be the new winner.
But I will say that we haven't seen them lose yet. Really at all. So maybe they
not even close to losing.
They've stayed pretty humble throughout, though.
Yeah.
And all their post game and everything.
That could also just be because I do really like them as a team too. They're one of my favorite to watch. So I am a little bit skewed in that aspect and a little biased, but I really think that they'll be a top contender.
I think
because they're playing so well.
I think the experience is what's winning out here. I mean, they've got talent on the team. They've got the experience to know how to prepare against these teams. They have experience against a lot of these teams.
I mean, they don't even have experience preparing. I mean, they have, seriously, I think, and I'll say this again, I say this every episode, the strongest support staff in EU. Without a doubt. It's continuing to grow, too, I'm pretty sure, and it's the amount of work that gets put in. I mean, I talked to one of the analysts on the side, and I don't know exactly how many hours he puts in, but anytime I ask him for anything, he's working constantly, and he does a lot. And he's shown me a lot of it, and I can't talk about it, but it's the guy puts in 16-hour days prepping for these teams, and it's insane.
I really do have to say, I think I underestimated Orihen's support staff. I think the thing that really sold me on it was, so their main coach, Leduc, was previously a Copenhagen Wolves coach and previously Rockets coach, and both of those teams, when he was on the roster, did not perform that well. But looking at how Orihen is playing now, obviously, you can argue that maybe the players are more individually talented. You could say maybe there's other people in the background of it. But Leduc actually put out a guest article. I forget where it was, but it was on the front page of Reddit earlier this week. So you guys can dig through
about the ping system? The ping system article?
Ping session. Yeah. That was really, really smart to me. If you guys play ranked 5s with your friends, you play normals, and you want to step up your game, read that article about how every ping corresponds to missing is still missing, but every other one is a color of a ward, and you could catch timers and everything by using the ping system. If you
even missing isn't missing. That's the thing. Just to run through it for you guys really quickly. So every time you ping, it shows up in your timer in your chat, right? So the missing, and the pings correspond. So the I need help ping means teleport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so because it's blue and there's no blue ward, right? Like, really? So they use blue for teleport. And what that is that shows up in your chat. And then at any point in the future, you can look at that and say, okay, it's been 5 minutes. Their TP cooldown is up. It like gives you a way faster way than typing to put in ward cooldowns for pinks, for greens, for whatever, you know?
And like when you have a support staff that understands like not only just like communication like that, but understands the importance of those timers in like a macro sense of the game, that's why Orihen has the ability to move around the map, and that's why it's like the old Fnatic style where like they would move around the map, catch people out. They knew exactly where people were going to be. You could see in some of these games they're pinging where people are going to be without even having wards in those areas because they know. So I severely underestimated Orihen's support staff, and that's still not going to change the fact that I don't think they're going to be the best team in Europe, though.
Well,
I mean,
to also follow up on Tom's point with that, while we're just on the support staff, is that it's not just the support staff too; it's the willingness to be coached on top of that, and that could also be the reason why the coach didn't do necessarily well with Copenhagen Wolves or whatever, because those are younger players. We have old players here, so we have now old players taking a new style to the game and a new coach, so they're playing with their same old talent with new style and translating into the new meta very well. And I don't know. That's why I think they'll do very well.
And unlike, let's look at some old blood players, Froggen, who has not updated his playstyle since season 2. You know, like the only thing that changes is that guy's champions pool. And let's be real, like the best games he's had have been on Kassadin, who is a season 2, season 3 era champion. You know, I mean, like, I think it's rare that we see older pros who've had more experience, be willing to adapt, be willing to accept coaching when they came from an era where coaching wasn't a thing. And I think it's really refreshing to have a team that's like that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just, before we dust off entirely from Europe, let's just take a quick look at the matchups for next week that you guys are going to be most excited about. I'm definitely going to stick with our Origin theme here and say that Origin against Unicorns of Love is going to be pretty hyped up. I think if Origin goes in here and stomps Unicorns, that there's something, kind of going with the theme of what we've been talking about. There's definitely something going on here.
I think if Origin stomps Unicorns of Love, the only thing going on is Unicorns of Love continue to be inconsistent.
I don't know.
Or you're just going to keep making up excuses to not like Origin.
No, I think that's fair, though. Like let's be real. Unicorns of Love are pretty all over the place.
So if Unicorns of Love lose to Origin, that just means that they'll beat H2K later, so they go 1-1 and end up 9-9 again.
I think it's the last gate of a serious team before Fnatic. And if they can continue to pull that off, and then they go into that matchup against Fnatic in week 4 and have the opportunity to go 6-0, or 7-0 rather, that's a pretty big deal. Rockhat, I'm not thinking it's going to be any challenge for them.
I think my game to watch of the week is Unicorns of Love versus H2K. I think this is a battle of the two teams that were vying for second best team behind Fnatic in Europe last split and continue to show that they are still driving forces in EU. HGK was a little bit asleep behind the wheel at the beginning of the split, but they've picked it up and they're still performing like they were beforehand. Unicorns of Love, it's the struggle with inconsistency. They have hot games, they have cold games. They've changed their playstyle to be a little bit more scaling into the late game, so I really want to see how it pans out, because H2K play the fastest games in Europe. If they catch Unicorns of Love off guard, then maybe they might upset them. If Unicorns of Love make H2K play their game, Unicorns of Love will take the win. I think it's going to be probably the best match to watch all week.
Yeah, I definitely think it would, looking at it too. I think any other match that Origin or Fnatic have, which are normally the teams I would say to watch because I think they both play amazing games of League of Legends, there's no reason to assume that any of those guys are going to lose. Yes, there is upset potential in any one of those games, but just like much more likely than an upset, it's going to be a stomp in the favor of Origin or Fnatic, whichever one of those teams are doing that. So ULH2K feels like the closest matched game with the most on the line for both of those teams.
In terms of most on the line, I'm actually going to give it to Gambit and SK, because if both of those teams lose, which I expect them to, who is going to be stuck at the bottom, and who is going to be one up on the other one?
Gambit is going to be stuck at the bottom.
We're gonna go to like the 120-minute game, and the minions are going to end simultaneously. And we're going to find a way to have a tie. It'll be the first.
It'll just end to a
Power
coin
will
flip
go
at
out.
the end.
Rock,
paper, scissors.
See, if that's never going to happen because Forgiven will be farming all those minions.
You're right, but he'll also be playing like Caitlyn or Graves or Lucian and won't be able to do anything.
In other news, League of Legends releases a PvE game, and Forgiven is the best at it.
What was that one-liner that he gave last
Forgiven?
season?
Oh,
No.
by far.
Oh, yeah.
By far. Yeah, that was what the follow-up would have been to that. Speaking of terrible transitions, however, let's move
God,
over.
why?
I
See,
know, we
Mitch
went
had to
for
use
so
his voice
long.
because he couldn't use his face this time, and I appreciate.
Yeah, I don't have my
Ooh.
tape.
Can I hear the table
Ouch.
flip?
It's missing.
Oh wow! Way to just drop the ball. No
Flipped
face,
it
no
out the
table.
window last week.
Yeah, pretty much.
Let's move over to North America. Now, a bit of news for North America before we start going into the games.
Lost Fantasy?
No,
Oh, sorry.
that's
no.
that's the next section. TDK once again had to play with their emergency backups because they were still working. Yeah, I think what that big gulp that Dan just took is exactly what TDK has been doing.
They did play with Smoothie, though. It was only 2 subs this week.
Right. Same effect, however, going 0-2. So, not looking good for TDK.
I mean,
I think there's no point in talking about TDK until their whole lineup's here, until they've played for 2 weeks. Like, whatever.
I'm just
like,
saying
it sucks to be them, but like, I mean, like this isn't even their real team. It's like when the CLG B squad played, when CLG like went to Korea and was going to level up, right?
Yeah.
It was just it's just
Hot
like
shot in the top lane. Like,
they lost. What does this mean for CLG? Like,
Okay, that's
These are
fair.
all subs,
That's
like-
fair. But when you do it 2 weeks in a row, and it
No.
just was a complete dive bomb, that's going to hurt pretty bad in the standings come later on.
No, I agree. They're not winning this split.
Obviously not, but I think
Their
the problem
goal
is
was to not get like relegated.
they're the not relegated team.
who are they going to not get
They're
auto
the,
relegated against
please
Team
don't
8?
relegate us. Just
Like
please.
that's their hope right now. They have to beat Team 8. Obviously, there's a
It's
lot
not real
there's a
hard.
lot of time, and they still have a chance to somewhat recover. But this is not a good start for them by far. So let's talk about some matches before we hit CLG and TSM, because I honestly don't know how long we're going to spend on CLG TSM.
Not long.
0
So much to
minutes.
Talk about.
0 minutes. Let's talk about Gravity, who's had a very
That
interesting
was a great
start
game. They
to
had a great
their
week.
season. So Gravity went 2-0 this week, beating Cloud9 and Liquid. Liquid, who was at the time 3-0, breaking their win streak off entirely.
hint, they picked Rise.
Okay.
They did.
Are you going to
Keen
give the entire
Keen
game
also
to...
bodied Phoenix like
Yeah.
hard, so hard.
Well,
Like,
because honestly, the Gravity C9 game wasn't too much a game. It was mostly a Cloud9 not having really idea what they're doing and throwing really hard.
Let's
So-
focus in on that for a little bit, because Cloud9 did something interesting that game, and there's not too much that's different about the team as a whole. Cloud9, and obviously, if you didn't watch that game, it was pretty brutal. If you were ever a Cloud9 fan, ever, it was embarrassing for Cloud9 for the way in which they lost. But the one thing that they weren't afraid to do is continue to fight and continue to try to make very risky plays that could have put them up. They didn't just let the game fall and go on tilt and just completely fall apart. They made plays that obviously didn't work out for them. They lost the game. But they were still in there making calls, still in there making plays.
I just haven't seen Cloud9 lose a dragon fight so hard before. They usually are very good around their dragon fights. They had the kind of the gambit idea of back where you get them on a dragon fight, they're somehow going to win, and they got slaughtered. What was the time mark or something like that? It was around, I think, 15 minutes or so that they had a dragon fight, and they got the dragon stolen from them, and then pretty much got aced. And it was just like, well, if Cloud9 can't win in their strongest point, because that has arguably been their best, strategy is objective control. If they can't control objectives, they're just not going to win. Like Sneaky kind of dashed into the wall. The Incarnation was just kind of not around the fight. Meteos was just nowhere to be found. They all just kind of died. And then Gravity just was kind of like, well, let's just go walk to Baron now and just take that for free, and then just kind of win the game. So I don't know. It was frustrating to just kind of watch.
Yeah.
So before I like shit on Cloud9 a little bit here, good props to Gravity for playing well this week. Like they did deserve those victories. They were well
Team
earned.
Flash. Whew.
Yep.
Like Gravity did play really well, especially against Liquid. Cloud9.
And
I am not okay.
Balls,
So here's
Balls had Rise.
it's not a free win.
It's not a
It's
free win.
It's broken.
Just like Gambit, they lost with Rise.
yeah. Oh God.
Yeah. true. All right, so here's the thing, and we're going to talk about this probably for the rest of the season. Losing High was a massive deal for Cloud9. You got to think. You lose your shot caller. Like, obviously, the immediate upgrade is that you get better mechanics in Incarnation, right? I mean, Incarnation, a much stronger individual player, but you break up your whole team dynamic and your whole shot calling structure for your team. That's the trade-off. And so, in the long term, Cloud9 may be stronger, maybe be top team in NA next season. But this season, no. Like, it's just not realistic to expect that. I think what we said, I don't remember who said it last week, but it's like they traded out High, which was like a guaranteed top 2 in NA, right? For Incarnation, which is a season where they are probably just going to get shit on, but they'll come back stronger. But right now, I mean, we saw how disjointed Cloud9 looked. We saw like picked apart by a TF. And they're not a team that would have done that in the past. They're much more organized than that, much smarter than that, and especially in their loss versus Dignitas too. I mean, we saw the same thing. They just got picked apart.
See, even if they're not doing great this split, and I know you're kind of writing them off, and I tend to agree really heavily on that.
Well, I don't think.
Well, no, I'm saying this season's going to be kind of a recovery season, a rebuilding one. I think that if they can get their stuff together towards the end of the split and maybe not win the playoffs at all, they'll be in that same position that we're talking about for Orihen with the gauntlet. And if they can get that synergy going right at the right time at the end, maybe do something, maybe make worlds, but I don't know. They gotta really, really come together and get some sort of synergy first.
Are you thinking that they're an instant win, or at least should be an instant win?
What do you mean?
Playing against them?
No.
Well, no, because the issue with Cloud9 too is that so they've taken away. There's two major huge weaknesses with Cloud9, at least for me. One, they have no idea how to come from behind. They have no idea how to come back in a game if they've at all lost the lead. They're just kind of like, well, we don't really know what to do anymore, and they just kind of lose. And two, now they're huge is weak. That was always a weakness. That was always kind of their thing. Even with High on it, if they did get behind, they did have struggles coming back. But now that they don't have the objective control, it's basically up to their laning, and their laning is okay. It's not great, it's not bad, but it's not nearly their strong point either. So they don't really have a strong point at the moment. And until they find what their niche is of what they can do really well, I don't think they're going to be a free win because I think they're all very good players. But I think they're going to be pretty easy to destroy if the other team just strategically outdoes them, which at this point doesn't seem like it's very hard if Dignitas can crap on them that hard, and then Gravity can just kind of walk over to Dragon and kill all of them without any that wasn't even a fight. Usually the thing was this Cloud9 usually would put up a fight for an objective. There wasn't even like a fight. It was just over. They just walked in and just killed them all, walked out, walked Baron, and the game's ours. Cool. All right, boys, on to the next.
In the past with Cloud9, the reason the Cloud9 was so good when they first came in was because they were the only team in NA who could play from behind. That's what I disagree on, is that they used to be the team. They used to come back from gold leads. They used to turn entire games around on dragon fights. That's what Ash Zyra was all about. Teams learned, okay, we have a lead. We can never again go for a dragon because we will lose. And their whole mantra was that they could play from behind. And when internationally you look at good teams can play from behind. That's what defines a good team. This season, though, I completely agree. I don't think they can play from behind this season. I think they've lost that major shot calling voice, and with that, a lot of the confidence in playing from behind.
I honestly think that you can peg a lot of Cloud9's problems, not only just in the adjustment of where their roles are on the team, such as shot calling for Meteos or what is Incarnation going to bring to the table, but I think because they're so worried about that their overall lane play is suffering, and one of the big kind of pain points is going to be, I think this is very well illustrated in the second game of week 1, where they picked a double scaling composition. I think it was Kog'Maw in the mid lane, and they had Ashe in the duo lane. And when one of those lanes fell behind, Balls was in a very detrimental matchup of a Gnar versus a Maokai. They weren't able to pull off their lane swap. Because of the way that the lanes played out, Cloud9 wasn't really able to apply pressure from the jungle. Meteos had nowhere to gank, and therefore they just kind of fell back and sat in a losing 3-lane situation. I really feel like it's on Balls and on Meteos to kind of step up and take a lot of the brunt of this, because we know that Sneaky and Lemon are going to be playing well enough in their lane to kind of go head-to-head against almost anybody in NA and come out ahead in a 2v2 situation, but you need to, like, they can play safe, they can make sure they don't get caught out, they can ward properly. I think that lane is okay, but it really comes down to Balls' teleport usage and what Meteos is going to be doing in the early game. Because it used to be Meteos ganks Balls' lane, Balls gets a kill, then Meteos goes everywhere else that Balls isn't on the map. That's how they played when High was on the team. This let Meteos then apply pressure to the duo lane. This let Meteos go invade the enemy jungle. This let Meteos help High out in the losing lane situation. Meteos hasn't really shown that kind of prowess, and Balls has struggled in the lane phase so far these 2 weeks.
And when we also think about like the difference between High and Incarnation, High was ridiculously selfless. Like, High never demanded jungle pressure. High always lost lane for sure, but it was never like, I need to get ahead. High never needed to get ahead. He would play champions like Zed, he'd win lane. He would play champions like Corki, he would farm and he'd play safe. He'd play Lissandra. His Lissandra was awful, but for the most part, he was where he needed to be in team fights, even if they ended up losing the game. And we look at Incarnation, very different style of mid laner. Wants more farm, wants more attention, struggles in the laning phase a lot more than High did. And I think, as a result, like, not only has the jungle dynamic for the team changed, like where Meteos needs to apply pressure, because I think he has a lot less opportunities to go top when he needs to focus on mid, but also, like, now he has to shot call too. And I just think that, I don't know if Meteos isn't inclined to do it, but it just, from interviews with that guy in the past, like, he seemed very content being the god of the jungle and nothing more.
Well, the interesting thing about that is, at least from what I was picking up from the casters, Meteos' responsibility actually used to be the shot calling when they fell behind. So I think it's the shift, not necessarily to shot calling period, but the shift to shot calling all the time and being responsible for the team's success in the early game, that's causing such a distraction and putting him on tilt by the time that going behind would be an issue, and he thrived in that shot calling function. So it's definitely a thing I think they need to adjust to. These next couple of weeks are big weeks for Cloud9, because they've got who do they got next week? They've got Liquid, which is going to be a really tough matchup for them.
That'll be rough.
They also have Team 8, which I don't know what will be said about Cloud9 if they drop it to Team 8, because that should be still a pretty easy win, but you never know. You really never know. Team 8's got to eventually kind of get their feet into the ground, and if it's that team to do it, I think it's actually going to be a huge boost for Team 8, because you're still beating Cloud9. You're still beating the players that are good.
To be fair to Team 8, they've changed a lot too. I think. Maple Street wasn't necessarily, like, talking to Matt, the former head coach for Team 8, like, Maple Street wasn't necessarily a negative impact on the team environment or a bad player, but Nian has been a big upgrade for both team environment and an upgrade mechanically as a player. Obviously, has that shown through yet? No, not so much, but keep in mind, they played and practiced with Maple for week 1. So they gave up a week of practice just to try to get decent results with Maple, and they've only had 1 week with Nian to really practice. So I think we have to give them time too.
Right.
I just feel so bad for Team 8, because watching Team 8 games this week, it just kind of seems like the old Challenger Team 8, where it was, all right, things are going on. All right, let's back away. Oh, Cali Trolls is in the middle of the enemy team. Quick, let's save him.
Yep.
Oh, wait, these guys are better players than the Challenger guys we played against. Oh, man, we just got aced at 10 minutes. Oh, that's really bad.
Also, Nian is doing a lot more of the shot calling, and Callie is doing a lot less, is what I've been told. So that could be something to do with it too, as Callie is very used to calling a fight and having his team follow up, and Nian obviously very different when calling from an AD carry position.
Well, ending this part of North America before we move on to other teams, we'll end where we started. Gravity's got an interesting week next week. They have CLG, and they also have Dignitas, which is weird.
Tied for first place, Dignitas.
Okay, who isn't tied for first place? That's the
half the league.
Cloud9, Enemy, Impulse, Team 8,
there's a lot of
TDK.
There's a lot of teams. I think it'll be an interesting week for Gravity. It'll be a chance to really prove themselves against CLG. If history tells us anything, and we'll move on to CLG TSM now, losing a game to TSM that's hyped up as much as it is has never benefited CLG. So let's go there.
CLG lost. We're done.
CLG lost.
Pretty much it, actually.
How deep do you want to go into this?
So this is on
Well,
my
That was
birthday.
pretty deep.
Here you
That
go.
was pretty
Here you
deep.
go.
Because I'll spend an hour on
Well,
pick
let's-
ban.
Let's
We can
let's
figure
be
it out.
fair.
Listen,
Let's be
man,
fair.
just-
That's as deep as the game went.
Yeah, no, they were down 3K gold pretty much from the start. Like it just
Yeah.
picking Lee Sin was a horrible idea in my mind when Sejuani's open. If Sejuani was banned, I can kind of see what they were trying to go for the.
Smithy is scared of Sejuani.
Yeah.
He hasn't been scared of it so far in the season. Has been doing okay with it. You know, yeah, sure he misses an ult or two every once in a while. I mean that sucked and it was pretty hard to watch. But it's
And
better than
everyone
playing a
made fun
jungler
of
that
him,
does
I noticed
nothing at late game. And you give Bjergsen, one of the best mid players in North America, his favorite champion of LeBlanc, who just crushes the whole time. Because all the what I will give credit to on CLG, the lanes did really good. The lanes kept up. You know, there wasn't really a crush in the lane. I mean, yes, Doublelift and Aftermove got killed by a 5-man gank. What? I mean, how are you going to live through that? They dove through 2 towers and killed them. Like, I mean, when they commit that many resources, but the thing is TSM committed so many resources and CLG's not able to do anything with it because there's a Lee Sin. Like, he's not.
No, it's okay. So here's the thing about the Lee Sin is like you have to pick a strong early game jungler to stop Bjergsen from shitting on your lanes.
They didn't do that though.
They didn't do that though. That's the thing. I agree with you, but he didn't do that. Like, so that's why if he's not going to
like
do
that.
that.
No, that's like the thing. If you go back, watch his pathing because the thing is as much as Xmithy didn't get a kill or an assist, he farmed the jungle and he hovered mid all the time, and he made sure that Santorin couldn't go there. And him existing there and being spotted on the occasional ward stops Bjergsen from all-inning. Unfortunately, Bjergsen then gets to farm. And here's the thing about Bjergsen and the other guy being Xiao Zhao when they play LeBlanc. They're the only LeBlancs in NA that understand how to play LeBlanc in a team fight, that aren't scared to jump into the backline, do a rotation, and jump out. Every other person struggles. But when you give Bjergsen LeBlanc, you're giving away so much. And so for them to say, okay, Doublelift's Kalista is equivalent to Lee Sin or to Bjergsen's LeBlanc, and additionally to Santorin's Rek'Sai, after we've seen exactly how that matchup goes in the game before against TIP when, you know, Xiao Zhao played Azir into to LeBlanc Rek'Sai, that was stupid. I don't think Lee Sin is the problem. I think the philosophy that Doublelift's Kalista is your priority pick when there's so many strong picks in the meta right now is ridiculous. I think AD carry is a very impactful role. I think Ashe, Kalista, and Sivir are all amazing, but like, why aren't you picking Sivir? Why are you leaving Sivir for Wild Turtle to take? Wild Turtle, who really can only play Sivir, like, well, at like a competitive level equivalent to Doublelift. I think the Lee Sin pick was awkward, I agree, but like, what else does he take? Out of his entire pool, he needs to have...
He takes Sejuani.
That has no early pressure.
Well,
that
who cares?
No
they didn't
pressure.
do anything for 13 minutes in the game. Nothing happened. So my thing was that because
I'm going to interject here and say that Sifa's reasoning behind the Lee Sin pick is by having TSM do nothing for 13 minutes, it was better than having them get 5 kills mid lane at 13 minutes. Like,
so, I guess
the Sejuani pick needs to hit level 6 before it does anything. And if your Azir is behind in the LeBlanc matchup, and therefore LeBlanc is now roaming bot lane, and you're down a dragon at 10 minutes in, Sejuani at level 6 is not going to do shit in that situation.
I definitely... Go ahead, sorry.
Why are they blue? Like, okay, so just jumping into champions like a little bit more, like, when you're on blue side, you have first pick, right? Like, so whatever you ban, whatever they ban, you get first choice of the OPs. Of course, they're going to get 2, and there's a lot of strong picks in this meta, so you have to be careful what you leave open. But why is your first priority Kalista against not the best AD carry in North America, Wild Turtle? And
Doublelift is really good.
Yeah, clearly, CLG, well thought out strat. And then the other thing is, like, why are you banning Gragas on blue side? Like, the only reason you ban a jungler on blue side when there's 2 broken junglers, Rek'Sai and Gragas, is if you can't play it. And that either Xmithy cannot play Gragas, who I think is definitively stronger than Rek'Sai, by the way, as far as top-tier junglers go, or it's just a bad ban, and you just wasted a ban for no reason. Like, you could have banned Bjergsen's LeBlanc.
I don't know why they banned the Rumble. I mean, I know they banned the Rumble because they wanted to pick the Maokai, but why would you pigeonhole Like the way I look at it right here is they have 2 carries on the team in this composition, and that's Pole Belter and Double Lift. Double Lift picking Callista already tells me that they don't want Double Lift to be the late game carry, because Callista in the late game is not as powerful as some of the other picks they could have picked up. She goes okay in team fights. She's a really mid game focused AD carry, because you can go either Bork or Bloodthirster into an attack speed item and start stacking things up. She also does extremely poor against tanks, and you've already banned out Gragas and you've banned out Alistar, so there's 2 big tanks out of the way. However, there's still a top lane tank that's going to come in. You take away the Maokai, okay, I can understand that. But you're putting so many eggs in your mid-game double lift basket and your late-game pole belter basket that, like you said, the Xmithy on Lee Sin pick, you could have not banned Gragas and gotten Rek'Sai or Gragas in that situation and picked a different AD carry. And it would have synergized so much better with your composition. You would have then opened up Zion's part to picking something like a Gnar that could have been a little bit more carry potential from the top lane that still would have done what Maokai wants to do in team fights by locking people up, by locking up Bjergsen, locking up Wild Turtle. Like, I think CLG went into this one with a strategy, but it was the wrong strategy to attack a team like TSM.
Yeah, because my issue was, by the way, so I guess I'll more clarify what my issue was with Lee Sin, because I do agree with you on, because Bjergsen not getting a kill or really any roam or any successful anything on LeBlanc for 13 minutes is really bizarre. Like that, so they did do a really good job making sure he didn't leave the lane, but there were so many team fights that Lee Sin didn't do crap. He just was basically sitting there like, oh my god, guys, we're fighting, but I can't really queue in, I can't really ult
And I don't think the Lee Sin pick is good. I think it's the only pick you can make with Xmithy's champion pool. Like, I hate it too. But my issue isn't the Lee Sin pick. My issue is the draft leading up to the Lee Sin pick that made that your only viable option for a jungler.
Which is kind of like, that's right to me. Once I did see their team comp versus that was only... TSM they did a really good job punishing that, in my mind, though, because they just farmed up. Dyrus did a really good job not dying. He warded up really well. And then their gank on bottom lane was really a strong gank. That was
got to play League of Legends.
He seems pretty comfortable on Gnar in both games against this one on Gnar, and then he played Gnar against Tip as well.
Yeah, he's also in a Gnar against Maokai matchup, which is heavily Gnar favored.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think as you go forward, I think that matchup strays towards Gnar, but I think in the early game it's fine, just because Maokai has so much sustain and Gnar has to spam Boomerang to trade. But like, I think you're right. Like, I think it's also just weird that, it's weird for like a bunch of reasons. Like, I don't think TSM's comp was good either, because like we look at TSM's bot lane, Sivir Bard. Like, in what world do Sivir Bard ever want to be in a lane with Kalista?
Bard was so good, though.
No. His Bard was amazing. But listen, I know
when I saw that pick, I was like, what?
Yeah, I actually kind of thought that was game.
Wait, no, Bard throws out his ult. Sivir's able to speed up the whole team to catch up and get in the right position to wait for the golden to wear off and just wreck him.
Oh my god, I'm talking about laning phase. Thank you. Bard is amazing, but Bard's lane phase is crap. His level 1 comparable to Nautilus, no doubt. His level 2, yeah, you're gonna beat Hook fucking Riptide staggering blow from Nautilus. Like, you're gonna beat 2 CCs, 3 forms of CC at level 2 as Bard. It's not going to happen. So TSM built a comp where they didn't want their lane to 2v2, right? But they also they didn't want their lane, like, they wanted the lane swap so badly, but then like it just didn't happen, and it should have fallen apart from there. Like, that's the thing that was weird for me. And CLG did not get anything, and they farmed, and they had this amazing mid game team. And honestly, there's one team fight in the mid game right before that like 4-man Bard ultimate where I was like, damn, CLG know how to team fight. CLG know how to pull. Like, they did that so convincingly well, and then they like
turning point for them.
Yeah, then they like fucked up their focus in the next team fight, and then the next 2 team fights after that, it was like Bard ult, GG, and I was just like,
no, it wasn't even the Bard ult. It was his flash Q. He got a flash Q on both the carries in the middle of a team fight. That was such a risky flash Q. It was just like, wow, where he just stunned both Double Lift and Pole Belt. They're basically their only damage dealers, allowing TSM to just catch back up in a team fight and slaughter them. And it was actually one of those where it's like, wow, let's play. Way to just win the game from a certain aspect, because it was just, I don't know. Once I saw the 5-man bot gank, because CLG knew that bot gank was coming, and the fact that TSM was able to put CLG in a position where they knew a gank was coming and they still couldn't avoid getting killed twice, and could only get a mid turret that had like 50 HP left on it, and that was their only trade. So where TSM was able to get 2 kills and a full turret, and CLG's only response was getting a turret that was already dead, was just like they started to out-rotate CLG, and once you start to out-rotate CLG is when they're like, wait a minute, wait a minute, we're usually out-rotating everybody else. How are we supposed to do this? So then they try and force team fights. One of them went really well, like you said, and they were able to catch a Baron. But then TSM did a really good job respecting CLG. Playing back, we're like, all right, just going to let this go out. Bjergsen's on LeBlanc. Let's just give him some time to not have the advantage. And then right as that advantage came back to TSM, they really did a good job taking that advantage to the win. So, I mean, it was one of those games where it's just like TSM really did just outplay them, essentially. They just, I don't know, they just had the better mentality to it. But it wasn't a game where I was just like, oh, CLG's done or whatever like that, because their lanes did do really well. But I just did not like the like you said. You said it very well. Forcing yourself into a Lee Sin pick was just bad.
So real quick, I'm curious. Is it like my replacement for Lee Sin right now in my mind, and I'm probably way too tired and overthinking this. What about Evelynn? Would she have been horrible in this instead of Lee Sin?
In my opinion, Evelynn is exclusively a counterpick to Nunu and is very limited in what she does. She also doesn't have an amazing Rek'Sai matchup because Rek'Sai
can see her.
That's true.
At all times.
That's crazy. I was going to say, the only thing I'll give you with Evelynn is you at least have to make TSM kind of play on their heels, just because you have no idea when the Evelynn's going to pop up. But
like, I don't even think Bjergsen cares. Like, that's the thing about it, the Evelynn with the Sivir. Yeah, I agree. But I don't think Bjergsen, like, why does Bjergsen care about Evelynn showing up in his lane? Like, dash away.
Yeah.
There's no CC there. Like, he doesn't care. Like, Evelynn, flash, E. Oh, look at those red buff stacks on Bjergsen. What are you going to... Oh, distortion.
He's just going to push W and goodbye.
It's still pressure. It's still more than they'd actually do.
No, and the thing about it is it's like... But I think the same thing would happen. Smithy would have walked in the lane. A little attention thing would have appeared above, like would have seen Evelynn just out of the corner of his eye, jump back. I don't know. And Evelynn's also much squishier. Like, so vulnerable in mid-div.
I just think it would have been a much different game with the LeBlanc ban versus a Rumble ban.
Yep. I think that's fine. I would also say not banning Gragas and instead banning LeBlanc. I think the game would have been very different. Or picking different shit would also be fine. Stop picking Kalista. I think Sivir's a much better AD carry. I think Urgot's god tier, but I don't think anyone in NA plays Urgot, and that's fine.
I don't think Double wants to play Urgot because Urgot's not a carry. Like,
that's fair. Yeah.
So let's wrap up North America this week with just taking a look at next week's matchups and seeing which games are going to be best. I'm thinking just kind of off the bat, I mentioned it already, Liquid has a pretty big week. They've got Cloud9, who has a lot to prove at this point, and they have Impulse. Liquid's kind of been silently keeping up at the top, and just in the case that we haven't really been talking about.
I want to give Liquid at least a shout-out from me of where they've really gotten their shit together. Can, especially from last split to where they were like, oh, Piglet's maybe not working out. We're almost to the point where you think Piglet's going to get the boot because he seemed like he just wasn't cooperating. He's playing really well. Their bot lane synergy is doing really well. I mean, their loss to Gravity was pretty insane, but it was. That's
always a fun matchup to watch.
I see the team that they wanted to form last split.
Right.
The team that they were hoping they were going to be is apparent in this split to me. We'll see how it continues. We'll see how it actually ends in the split. But so far, I think they're playing very well together as a team.
I think this week in general is a really good testing point for all of the teams that are 3-1. Because they all play at least one other 3-1 team, except for Liquid. They play Cloud9 and they play Impulse. And I honestly think Liquid, in the position and the power they're looking at right now, they should 2-0 this week. But I mean, like, you have TSM playing Dignitas, you have Gravity playing Dignitas, you have CLG playing Gravity. So all those 3-1 teams are actually going to get to see who is actually like the top 2 or 3 teams and who is middle of the pack this week.
Yeah, it's a pretty big week for Enemy as well. I think they have to beat Team 8 pretty handily, at least for mental reasons. You can't take a loss to an 0-4 team when you're 2-2. That's going to put you too low mentally in the standings. And they have an interesting matchup against CLG. Is it going to be the CLG who's mentally defeated after losing the TSM?
They better win. I got Pobelter on the fantasy lineup now.
Yeah, they should win.
That's not how you spell Enox.
Didn't we used to call him Throw Belter? I'm going to bring that up every time somebody says Po Belter.
Outbox, Throw Belter, Po
So
Belter.
bad.
Yeah.
So bad.
Weren't
it used to be terrible.
Weren't they on the same team, too? Ooh.
That'll be a good matchup for sure.
Hashtag compelling NA narrative. Former teammates go head-to-head.
Awesome. So let's talk, just to kind of wrap up the episode. Let's kick our shoes off and talk some fantasy before everybody else gets to complain and shit. I want to talk to you guys about.
I don't have to complain. I won pretty handily.
The emotional roller coaster that I had to experience. So imagine that your whole fantasy week comes down to you being on top by 10 points, and I happen to be up on Mr.
Hold on.
Sifa.
Can I set this better? Can I hear? Give me a shot. Give me a shot here. This is the best part. We come out of EU. We both have 3 players left on our team because we both have, I guess, 4 parts of our roster or whatever, or our EU, right? And he's got 2 Origin players. He's got Fnatic players, and he's like 50 points ahead of me, right? And so I'm like screwed. I have Phoenix because he has easy matchups this week, and I think he's going to do well. But he's got Cloud9 players, and he's got Doublelift, and there's no way I can win. And I'm just like, damn. Let's
put some numbers to those disparities. Soaz is 66 to Impact's 25, and Xpeke is 49 to Phoenix is 18.
Yeah, so at this point, I'm screwed. I'm like, well, I guess I'll get him next week. But I've got like Mithy, and Mithy's got like 60 points at this time, 63.
Yeah,
so I'm winning.
Fucking ridiculous.
Winning pretty handily.
It's a support player, goddammit.
Yeah. and like I've got Rainover, and he's got Meteos, and I'm like, okay, well, there's no way Meteos is going to get anything, and Mott's doing so well, and then, oh god, it's like everything comes together for me, and Cloud9 shits the bed. I mean, Phoenix sucks too. Don't get me wrong, Phoenix was garbage for fantasy points this week, but like Cloud9 got 9 points. The team Cloud9 got 9 points.
Meteos got 11. It was 11.
11.
Yeah.
How much? I mean, I don't even remember how much did Meteos get. Like
16.
12, 13.
16. Yeah. So it pretty much. So after all was said and done, it came down to Dan and I squaring off. I have Doublelift and Dan has fucking Wild Turtle. For every little benefit TSM got in that game, it was a huge buff to my TSM boner, but it was a little shiv to my fantasy. I don't even know.
It was so good, too.
And it's like also boner.
And it
you want a true underdog story? You got like the hyper carry, the staple hyper carry ADC, right? And when you think of hyper carry ADC in North America, it's Doublelift, right?
No, it's not. When has he been that recently? Ever?
Yeah, never. But he still has that reputation, right?
I just wanted to be known. I did not pick this team. I would not have Doublelift on here if I didn't get him delivered to me.
And we'll trade after next week after TSM are done with their free week, because I think next week is free for TSM. Which is
anyway, it ends up getting to the point where Dan and I are literally 0.5 points difference. That if you didn't know, Fantasy updates live, so we're both watching it, shit talking each other, and then all of a sudden, fucking Wild Turtle, like an asshole, pulls out a fucking triple kill at the end of the game, and then just gets one more just to fucking rub it in.
And the perfect part is, I didn't expect him to get any kills. But not only did Doublelift not get any kills, Wild Turtle's on Sivir. He literally pushes R and gets 4 assists for free multiple times. And it's so sweet. It's so good.
So fucked. So I lost, needless to say. Hey, Mitch, how'd you do?
See, I'm really sad that the camera's off because I've been flicking it off for like the past
it makes me feel a little better.
5 minutes.
Makes me feel.
Hey, well, at least you didn't forget to put Niels in, who was the top scoring champion of the fucking week.
79 points.
And I had.
You realize that
he has 132 points.
If you put
for the whole season.
If you put Niels in, I still would have won.
Yeah.
And I played Forgiven instead of Altec this week.
Yeah. Well,
boom.
Well, of course, had a whole team that just decided to just go fuck themselves.
I don't think we should ever auto draft again. I want to be clear here. I feel like the emotional investment that we get.
Maybe.
When we actually draft
Hold on. Let me just make a point on that. Maybe if you guys would fucking send me schedules, we could get something together.
Listen, audience, Mott's a dirty liar. We were all like, we're here and waiting, and he's like, ha ha ha, auto draft, get wrecked, and then we all lost.
We watched an auto draft, and I was like, no!
By the way, auto draft is starting the draft while no one was there, and then watch it. I sat there, and I live tweeted that shit for you guys, and then Dan comes in at the end and just starts fucking picking people left.
Yeah, to be fair, the only reason I got Mithy, and the only reason Mithy wasn't left in the Abyss, I thought people were picking stuff, and I was left out in the cold. I was like, shit!
Yeah,
and so I had like this pretty mediocre lineup, but I managed to get Mithy and Unicorns of Love as my last 2 picks.
Yeah.
I'm just happy that TSM has 17 dragons on the season and got me 43 points as a team.
Yeah, awesome.
You dick, Tom.
Let's,
because Diamond got me 10
One day
points.
I'll win something.
let's wrap this
You
one up.
lost to Anti-Mot, too. Oh, man. He's
I've-
not even here to trash talk you.
No.
It's probably better because I'm already demoralized enough.
Well, that's
I feel
okay,
bad.
because he's Canadian, so he'd probably just apologize for beating you, and that probably makes it worse.
I
I
get
feel
Dan
bad
next
'cause
week.
He keeps sending me trade requests, but I don't think he realizes that I'm not going to trade with him until I match up with him and beat him. Because why
You're
would
gonna
I
trade
give
with me?
him?
I
good
canceled.
stuff?
I canceled the trade request because fucking Wild Turtle has Dignitas and Dragon Knights next week. Like that's free points.
It's going to be a good week.
Well,
right.
hold on. Wait.
I even have. I put Dyrus on my fantasy lineup. That's how confident I am that TSM is just gonna just rush these guys down.
See, the best part about this is so far going into the week, we, much like NA, have two clear undefeated teams. Well, not undefeated. I guess this is like EU. Two clear undefeated teams, and myself and Sifa, who, I mean, come on, we cover EU, so clearly we're going to be fine with fantasy. We have two middle of the pack teams, which is Mott and Anti-Mott, and then the other guys who were 0 and 2.
Hey, well, see, the other guys, though, the other
I'm looking
guys
at my
haven't done
phone.
any roster swaps. The other guys played sneaky and fucking Diamond Proc this week versus who's been dropped, Diamond Proc and Sneaky. Who have they been replaced by? Smithy, or, maybe I will dominate, depending on who I feel like. But at least Niels is in this week, so fuck you, Tom. I'll beat you again.
I am playing a dangerous game this week against Mott, by the way. I am playing...
Mott's lineup is stacked as hell. I lucked out so hard. Let's be clear here. Mott's lineup is god tier. Double Lift shitting the bed was like God telling me that I had a chance for fantasy.
I need to find a swap out for my team.
I really need Unicorns of Love and Giants to really step it up this week so that Fnatic and Orihen just don't roll through their weeks. And I'm also playing a dangerous game of the Copenhagen Wolves Gambit lineup. Because Gambit is playing the Wolves, who is guaranteed to be like a 70-minute game, stacking up points, and then SK, and I'm assuming Gambit wins against SK. So...
Yeah.
Well, man, I hate to
Fingers
break it to you, but
crossed.
I've been playing Gambit for the last 3 weeks, and I think the most points I've gotten from a Gambit player was like 13
Shut
points.
up. Shut your mouth.
So,
Daddy
Yes!
needs to win.
Curse them! Curse the Mott!
All right.
so
Daddy needs to win.
Yeah.
Quoting
With
that
that-
one forever.
With that bombshell, we will take it out from here. Thank you for joining the T-Force LCS Rundown. If you're listening to this in podcast world and you showed up Sunday night all sad because it wasn't live, that's because we're on Mondays now. But that's going to be it for us. So peace.
Bye-bye.
See ya.